will not deny you of one tiny little praise. Naturally, however, it was only a matter of time when balls drop. Public participation and getting buy-in from society was inadequate, it was rushed, and it was selective. If you are going to do something, just do it properly. We live in a country where our lives are taken lightly. If government really cared about the lives of women and the LGBT+, we will be able to see progress. The system perpetuated by this government is innately violent, and it restricts progress and limits freedoms. It's all well and good to have ideas in theory, to have a plan, but if it's not implemented and actioned with precision, political will, efficient teams, and strong leadership, it means nothing. Your theories, your plans, your repetitive speeches mean nothing. And for this, you must take accountability. Stop with your rhetoric. No one believes you anymore. Stop playing X's and O's with our money and emotions and start spending the budget on things that matter. Stop being annoying with your lies and attempts to make it sound like you're getting a grip around GBVF when it's women and the violence they face that have you gripped around the neck. We must remove the red tape in government that holds our country hostage, step number one. Why must it be so difficult to get an efficient public service? When victims and survivors seek help from our public service, they must be able to get it without having to beg. Building trust within government institutions like SABC and within the justice system must happen. Building trust obviously doesn't happen in a day. It takes hard work and determination to accomplish. There must be more training for GBVF frontline workers. This training must be in-depth, it must happen continuously, it must challenge social norms, and it must be uncomfortable. There has to be processes in place that deal with incompetency and failure. This is not about taking one failed cadre and moving them elsewhere. This is about firing those who don't perform and hiring those who want to do the work. Another suggestion the DA will give this government for free is to prioritize processes that monitor and evaluate all government work without fear or favor. How on earth, Minister Mashabane, would you measure yourself and your success rate when your targets are focused around report writing and attending meetings? I mean, you yourself don't even attend committee meetings. It is only through monitoring and evaluation that you are able to see what works, change what doesn't, and find new ways to deal with old problems. I mean, this is not rocket science. Next, budgets must be spent on things that matter and things that will have an impact. Minister Mashabane, you cannot spend most of your budget paying high salaries for officials to take a year to develop a framework, but rather use these budgets for programs that assist women, for example, with legal assistance when they need help against their abusive husbands. Again, fang tips. Honestly, you can have all the themes you want, you can have all the debates you want. It doesn't change the fact that we live in a country where I might leave Parliament right now after this debate, and I might be harassed, raped, assaulted, or murdered. This is the country we live in. I thank you.
The EFF has not provided a name.
I'm here, Deputy Speaker.
Okay. Honorable Mautu, please advise your Chief Whip to communicate with us and give us names. It makes it easy for us. Go ahead.
Deputy Speaker, This past Sunday, Ntombokolo Kobani, a 41-year-old woman, was butchered to death by a estranged husband in Delft, Cape Town. Ntombokolo had decided to leave their marital home in Cape Town and went to live with family in Delft after she found her husband to be having open sexual relations with other women in the township. The husband then went to a family home and killed her there in cold blood. While he is now arrested, he will likely spend a couple of years in jail and then get released on parole, as is now the case with Oscar Pistorius and 1,000 other perpetrators of these heinous crimes against women in this country. Early in October, Deputy Speaker, Flavio Tlongwane was arrested in Soweto after he was discovered to have killed and chopped a female companion and snatched her body parts in a fridge. He too will likely face the minimum sentence prescribed for the cases of this nature and then come back to society in which he has permanently removed his victim. In August, Nostelo Mtebeni, a last-year student at the University of Fort Hare, was murdered and had her body cut into pieces and stashed in a suitcase by Aluta Pasile, who was at the time alleged to be her boyfriend. In September, Nikita Maloney, a 20-year-old woman from Kwatshaltu village just outside King Williamstown, was killed by the father of their then 7-month-old baby, even after she had gone to the police to obtain a protection order against the abusive boyfriend. Deputy Speaker, we can go on and on the whole day, mentioning the names of women who have had their lives brutally taken from them by men who left behind their children with scars for the rest of their lives, who have left behind their families, who have to live with the agony for the rest of their lives. The violence and abuse against women are not only growing in this country, but the level of brutality is also getting even more sadistic. The institutions meant to protect women against these crimes seem to be folding their hands or are woefully out of depth and do not know what to do with these crimes. The Minister of Police reported that between April and June this year, over 10,000 rape cases were reported in South Africa, and that between July and September, almost 12,000 sexual offenses were reported in police stations across the country. We now all know that reported cases represent only a fraction of the actual crime going on in this country, and that thousands more cases of sexual offenses do not get reported to police stations. We also know, Deputy Speaker, that of the reported cases, only a tiny fraction will be prosecuted, and only a handful of the perpetrators will ever go to jail. This country is failing women. Our police, the prosecuting authority, the magistrates, the judges, and the correctional service facilities are hell-bent on perpetuating these crimes against women by giving the perpetrators a slap on their wrist. The formal yearly event marking 16 days of activism of no violence against women and children has become a meaningless box-ticking exercise because it offers no reprieve of any kind to women in the township, in the workplaces, in villages, whose bodies have been turned into crime scenes by the violence perpetrated by men in the main. Deputy Speaker, we understand that the violence against women is a societal problem and not merely a policing problem. We know that we need to eliminate poverty. We need to have better human settlement that allow for the full dignity of our people. We know that our people must have the land, the jobs, their freedom to express their spirituality in a free manner. While we pursue these ideals of social justice, we need to get our policing in order. It is a crime against society that SABC has not been able to sort out the backlogs in their forensic laboratory, endangering thousands of rape cases across the country. It is a crime against society that women do not feel safe going to report these cases at SAPS because they know that there aren't enough trained officers to deal with cases of women abuse at the police stations. We are tired of having to participate in this box-ticking exercise every year while women are being killed on a daily basis. We are tired of lip service and expensive functions that yield no results to the protection of women in this country. We are tired of rhetoric of thinking that gender-based violence and femicide is an occasion and it must be looked at within a period of time. We need action, manje, not tomorrow, not later. Now is the time to fight this societal problem. We need decisive leadership, not the clownish conduct of SABC and their Minister of Police. I thank you, Deputy Speaker.
Honorable MD Hlengwa.
Honorable Deputy Speaker, thank you. As we gathered here today to debate on the international campaign of 16 days of activity to end GBV and honor the Mama Keke, the women of South Africa are still waging a daily war against the monster of gender-based violence. This silent pandemic violates the brutalist and tears our communities and families apart. We cannot begin to debate social economic empowerment while our women and children are being slaughtered almost daily like animals. Despite the horrific daily report of violence against our mothers, daughters, and sisters, the government has failed dismal to protect the women of South Africa. Between April and June 2021 alone, over 10,000 women were raped, according to the latest crime quarterly report. This is only a 72.4 increase compared same period last year. We have matched crime and damage change, yet the government has still failed to convene the National Council on GBV and Femicide. 3 years later, while has the National Council on GBV and Femicide bill only published in October 2021. Why? Sesikhathele ukuma njalo unyaka nonyaka sithi sigubha lo 16, kodwa abesifazane base-South Africa basesaba ukuphumela emgwaqeni, basesaba ukuphuma bayobona ngoba izigulamkhuba nezigelekece usuku nosuku ziyababulala abantwana bethu abaphephile, omama nodadewethu. The COVID-19 pandemic, undeniable, have a much greater impact on the women of South Africa than the men. The injustice burden had to carried by women who were both frontline workers and caregivers at home. The IFP says what the women of South Africa face and demanded government action and action now to promote additional protection to our women working on the front line. In July 2021, the IFP demanded that the KwaZulu-Natal MEC for Social Development break her silence on when social workers would be vaccinated. The IFP demanded that social workers, the majority of which are women, must prioritize for the COVID-19 vaccine in KZN and nationwide. The COVID-19 pandemic has deepened gender inequality, and now, more than ever, we need to fight for equal pay, for equal opportunity for women, especially in local communities. The first step in empowering our women is to ensure safer communities.
Honorable Sengwa.
We need action now. Thank you.
Honorable Sengwa, your time has expired.
Yes.
Yeah, iphelile.
Thank you.
Dankie.
Yeah, but thank you.
Yeah, ngiyabonga. Please, members, just adhere to your allocated times, please. Honorable Breed.
Dankie, agbare young speaker. We are exactly halfway into this year's 16 Days of Activism for No Violence Against Women and Children campaign. We are commemorating the 22nd 16 Days of Activism campaign this year. We are debating no violence against women and children for the 4th time this year. We have debated GBVF, more than 12 times since the start of the 6th Parliament. And what tangible difference has these campaigns, these debates, these talk shops brought to the female and child victims of abuse? None. According to the latest crime statistics, rape is up by 72.4% or 2.8%, depending on what year you use as your benchmark. Sexual offences increased by 47.1%. Over 15,000 cases related to domestic violence was reported. And yes, statistics can be manipulated, and the different levels of lockdown have made stats difficult to compare to prior years. But whether the crime stats are distorted or not, the fact remains. Gender-based violence and femicide is up, and it is unacceptable. In the Minister of Police's own words, the stats show once again that South Africa is a very violent country. Bettina Wyngaard som dit net so mooi op. Toe sy gesê het, Suid-Afrika het van die mees progressiewe menseregte wetgewing ter wêreld en die beste geslagsbeskermingsmeganismes in die wêreld, maar is ook een van die gevaarlikste lande vir vroue om in te woon in die wêreld. And I ask again, what tangible differences have been made since the inception of this campaign? What tangible difference have the implementation of current laws, albeit by no means inadequate laws, made to assist women and children in need? What tangible difference has been made at police stations to support victims of domestic violence, abuse, and rape? What tangible difference has sexual offences courts made to the victims of sexual offences besides traumatize them? What tangible difference does it make if not even 12% of police stations countrywide have rape kits? Little to no tangible difference has been felt by victims. Chairperson, or Deputy Speaker rather, I am frustrated by the lack of change. My colleagues that serve on these committees, Honourable Sharif and the rest, are frustrated by the lack of change. South Africans are frustrated by the lack of change. 20 months after the approval of the 21 billion rand plan to eradicate GBV by 2030 and the promise of establishing a National Council of GBVF, we are still waiting. More than 2 years after the passing of Uyonene, Baby Lee Jeggles, Tasnie van Wyk, and the outcry by a country in mourning for its lives lost brutally, what has changed? What accountability has there been? After countless protests and even a joint sitting on a matter of national importance to discuss the way forward of GBVF, what has changed? What accountability has there been? Government has a responsibility to ensure that the police have the necessary resources to combat GBVF. The dysfunctional forensic division and especially the DNA backlog is unacceptable and needs to be addressed. This cannot stay a talk shop. But every citizen and community also have a responsibility to stop the moral decay which leads to it. But it starts with us as political leaders. Chairperson, I conclude. The theme is moving from awareness to accountability this year. But forgive my cynicism. They say that seeing is believing. And I sincerely hope that this year we shall see. I thank you.
Thank you. Honourable Soekers.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker.
Speaker, Deputy.
Yeah, Honourable Hadebe, what are you raising on?
Deputy Speaker, I raised my hand when Honourable Master was still on the platform, because according to the rules that you cannot speak before unless we have raised the hand on our gadget. I raised it during that time. What I'll request, I was going to rise on Rule 84.
Honourable Hadebe.
Yes, ma'am.
Manje ufuna ukuthini ngoba sesiphakathi nokuxoxa le ndaba?
No, the rules were not observed. The rules are very clear, Honourable Chairperson, Honourable Deputy Speaker, that before you speak, when you're on a platform, you raise your hand through your gadget. I raised my hand then, and then it was not recognized. I don't know whether we were made aware of that or not.
Okay. No. Yes, next time we'll find a way to see your hand when it's raised so that I can attend to it. I know some people.
All right.
Yeah, no,
Yes.
it's okay now. That's fine. We have passed that. Live with that. We'll deal with it, yeah. Okay, Daddy. Honorable Sukers.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Watinta Bafazi, Watinti Mbokodo is the slogan of the women's movement in our nation. Well, women are struck every day, every hour and minute in this country. Her children are exposed to trauma and violence from the womb to an early grave. The impact of violence in the development of children in areas such as the Cape Flats and the prevalence of mental disorders are areas of research that must be prioritized. We must go on the offensive in this fight and unify our efforts beyond party lines. The women of this sixth parliament must take on the issues of GBV as legacy projects for this sixth term. We must challenge GBV within the structures of power and address the abuse of power where it exists. The low rate of investigations and convictions of police officials who perpetrate heinous crimes against vulnerable women demands a strong response from us. The Kanaland debacle should have never happened. The African National Congress has further tarnished the legacies of people like Charlotte Maxeke and Albert Lutuli in their support of ICOSA. And only after tremendous pressure, it took the decision to withdraw from the agreement. This was a terrible example of moral leadership that also tarnished the credibility of President Cyril Ramaphosa and the ANC as a so-called progressive movement. In Kanaland, there is a culture of exploitation that resembles the past, a culture of impunity where young girls are being exploited by men for economic survival, sex for gifts or money. It contains elements of the ugly history of migrant labor that women had to survive in this country by giving up their bodies for a roof over their heads and for the survival of their children. The ANC should apologize to the nation for its support of ICOSA in that municipality, for it endorsed the sexual abuse of minors, the exploitation of women, and it continued to excuse rape by powerful men in the name of political expediency. I say this to you today in memory of the teachers who evoked in us the ideal of a just society by mentioning the names of Chief Albert Lutuli and the history of the African National Congress. You represented the ideal of justice for all to a generation. It is an indictment to your history. To the women of Africa and this nation, South Africa, the biblical story declares that your seed will trample the head of the snake, and that some of you will rebuild the deserted ruins of your cities, that you will be known as a rebuilder of walls and a restorer of homes. Rise in the power of God unashamedly, fearlessly,
member, I'm afraid your time has expired.
United.
Honorable Kwankwa.
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. Nearly 20 years, rather, more than 20 years after the campaign for 16 Days of Activism was adopted, a lot of gaps still remain. The gender-based violence has actually become very prevalent and pervasive in our society and has become one of the most pervasive human rights violations in this country and globally, if you like. As a third of all women keep on experiencing this kind of violence on a regular basis. As we are already aware, not only does GBV threaten human security, peace, and development, it also shatters lives on a daily basis. We wake up daily to stories of how our women are being victimized by men, people who are supposed to protect them and ensure the safety of everyone on a daily basis. We also hear of stories where we go to provinces and do constituents work of young women in particular and women in general who allege that there are many stories in municipalities, provincial governments, and when it comes to tenders, where they expect to pay with sex for jobs, and there's also allegations for sex for tenders. And these are things that society needs to root out if we're to root out the scourge of the gender-based violence. Let us be honest, campaigns like the 16 Days of Activism, while they are great initiatives to curb the problem, they are not enough on their own to fight against the pandemic. We have to address all the systemic changes and challenges that impede the transformative agenda and the approach that we have adopted over the past couple of years. First of all, we have to unite and fight against gender inequality because it is such prevailing inequality is perpetrated by a patriarchal system across the social, economic, and political spectrum that seem to normalize male dominance over women. The same inequalities that allow an economic form of violence of gender pay gap, where there is a difference in wages between men and women for the same work of equal value. We must be encouraged and equipped to participate, to ensure, we must encourage other women to participate and to make sure that they are fully equipped to participate in the economic mainstream of the country. The other thing that government needs to do urgently is to make sure that we have the political will needed to strengthen and enforce reasonable laws against all the perpetrators. The capacity of law enforcement agencies must be reinforced for them to perform true investigations of all LGBT reported crimes and to ensure that all cases are concluded and that all the perpetrators are thrown in jail so that we can make an example about all of those who continue to violate our women. I thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Honorable Mahau.
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. Heartfelt condolences to the families who lost their loved ones, future leaders of this country, due to GBV. To name one, Nostelom Tembeni, and many more others, may their precious soul rest in peace. Honorable Deputy Speaker, it is clear that we have a massive problem with GBV in our country, and what the government is doing now is just a drop in the ocean. More intensive efforts are needed to adequately deal with the scourge. Just to mention the few, government GBV and command center alone recorded more than 120,000 victims on the first 3 weeks of lockdown. Vodacom support call centers saw a 65% increase in calls from women and children seeking urgent help after lockdown began. A report from SABC is reporting that only about 14% goes to trial, and there are convictions on only about 7% of these cases, which means a retraining of our SABs to deal with gender-based violence is very critical. As long as women are economically depending on abusive men for survival, the stats on GBV will continue to rise. Let us appreciate, Honorable Deputy Speaker, the sectoral multi-sectoral fund on GBV and femicide responsive fund from the President. But we are saying it is not enough. Let there be budget for all the pillars within a national strategic plan, the GBV pillars. That will assist a lot. It makes to make the national development plan goals to be realistic as far as gender-based violence is concerned. We are proposing that at least all the departments must have a ring-fenced budget to deal with gender-based violence over and above. Most of the time, GBV is taking place at a ward level. If municipalities are quiet in terms of addressing the GBV, one of the recommendations would be municipalities must be taken on board and have a dedicated budget to address the GBV. As ATM, we are firm, Deputy Speaker, on saying justice-based capital punishment, which is equal to death penalty, to all heinous crimes will be the solution. I thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Honourable August. Peter May, mute your system there, man. Thank you. Honourable August.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. There is no doubt that the physical, emotional and sexual violence against women and children continue to escalate at an alarming rate. No one is born with violence running through their DNA. We are born into a world that has become besieged with violence that we see within our families and our communities. And there is no magic wand available to the state to stop this scourge either. We have to do it ourselves. All of us as individuals in our organizations and workplaces and as a society. How do we do it? The first step is diagnosis. We must acknowledge that we are dealing with a pandemic that never sleeps 365 days per year. We cannot condense our response into 16 days of activism and hope it will have an effect for the rest of the year. 16 days of activism is not a vaccine. The second step revolves around ownership. The plague of gender-based violence is brewed in our homes, in our attitudes towards each other, in what our children learn from us. We're teaching them early to disrespect girls. Every single South African has a responsibility to question our structures and practices at home contribute to poisoning the minds of our children, specifically our boys. It is an uncomfortable question. We can't hide behind our cultures or traditions. If we continue raising our boys with the same set of values, our girls and women will continue to suffer. We need to break this cycle and treat both our girls and boys to respect one another and value each other as equal to birth a new way of gender relations. The third step is where the state comes into it, with its policing, criminal justice, education and social development functions. Good proposers will redefine the role of police and police stations. They should become hubs of compassion and support, prioritizing safety and security, while ensuring perpetrators get the message that if they cross the line, they are going to get caught. We are mindful that it is fashionable in South Africa to hold government directly responsible for all of our woes. The state does have enormous responsibilities, but that don't give the rest of society a free ride to sit back and wait for the land of milk and honey. That a country of freedom, fairness, and justice that most of us want requires most of our attention. The non-profit sector, already responsible for so much good work, must step up to the plate and incorporate the gender education into organizations' day-to-day activities. Good wants to thank all the NGOs that deals with the GBV on a daily basis. Thank you, Deputy Chair.
Thank you, Honorable August. Honorable Mananiso.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Let me start by giving the message of condolences to the families of those who have lost their kids in spaces where we believe that it's spaces of development, which is schools. I don't want to go and name them because we understand that gender-based violence is a pandemic. So we might be not knowing of other kids, Chief Whip. So that is why I'm saying that we are sending our message to everybody who has felt this heat, these deep barbaric actions of GBVF.